Ryan Collins leaned across the car, pushed open the passenger door, and said 4 words that would destroy him. "Get out. We're done." Then he reached over without looking at her, grabbed Sophia's purse off her lap, took her phone right out of her hand, and dropped them both onto the seat beside him. Sophia didn't scream. She didn't beg. She transferred herself into the wheelchair in the freezing dark alone. The way she'd learned to do everything alone these past 7 months, while the man she was supposed to marry sat behind the wheel and stared straight ahead. She barely had both hands on the armrests before she heard it. The door slamming shut, the engine revving, the tires pulling away on wet asphalt. And then nothing. Just the wind, the sleet, and a broken bus shelter on a county road where no bus was coming because Ryan Collins knew that. He'd checked the schedule before he drove her out here. This was not a man losing his nerve. This was a plan. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. Because what Ryan didn't know, what nobody knew yet, is that the wrong stranger was about to drive down that road, and everything Ryan thought he'd buried was about to come back to destroy him. The storm hit Willow Creek, Colorado. The way bad news always does, faster than anyone expected, and harder than anyone was prepared for. By 7:15 on a Tuesday night in January, the county road that ran along the edge of town was empty in both directions. No streetlights, no other cars, just frozen asphalt and the kind of wind that finds every gap in your jacket and makes itself at home. Ethan Parker had both hands on the wheel of his '09 Ram doing 45, because anything faster felt reckless, and anything slower felt like giving up. His windshield wipers were losing the argument with the sleet. The heater worked on its own schedule. And somewhere in the back of his mind, underneath the exhaustion and the sawdust still stuck to his forearms, a small voice was doing the math on dinner. I had chicken thighs defrosting on the counter, half a box of pasta, maybe some frozen peas if Mia hadn't gotten into them again. Mia, 8 years old, probably sitting at the kitchen table right now doing homework. She'd already finished twice, just to have something to do while she waited for him. She never complained. That was the part that got him every time. She never once said "you're late again." Dad, even when he was. She just waited. Patient and quiet in a way no 8-year-old should have to be. Ethan pressed the gas a little harder. That's when he saw the bus shelter, or what was left of it. One wall of scratched plexiglass, a rusted metal frame, a bench that had been broken and half repaired. So many times it looked like a jigsaw puzzle, put together by someone who'd lost the box. Willow Creek had 3 bus routes, and this one ran twice a day, morning and late afternoon. There was no 7:15 bus. There hadn't been for years. He almost didn't stop. He registered it the way you register things when you're tired. Peripheral, half-processed, filed under. Not my problem. A shape in the dark. Probably a shopping cart someone pushed off the road. Probably nothing. But his foot lifted off the gas anyway, because the shape moved, just slightly. A tremor. Like someone shivering so hard they couldn't hold still. Ethan pulled over onto the gravel shoulder and left the truck running. He grabbed the flashlight from his glove box, out of pure reflex. 5 years of construction work, and 6 years before that, as a firefighter will do that to a man, and pushed out into the cold. The sleet hit him immediately. He ducked his head and walked toward the shelter. The flashlight beam found her. A woman. Early 30s maybe. Sitting in a manual wheelchair that was angled slightly off-center like it had rolled there on its own. She was wearing a wool coat that had probably been expensive once, now soaked through and dark with rain. Her hair was plastered flat against her face. Her hands, bare, no gloves, were gripping the armrests of the chair so tightly that even in the dim light, Ethan could see the whiteness of her knuckles. At her feet sat a single carry-on suitcase. The kind with the telescoping handle. The kind you grab when you're packing for a weekend trip, or when you're packing in a hurry and not thinking straight. She looked up when the beam hit her. Her eyes were dark brown. He'd think later. Dark brown, and they caught the flashlight and held it without flinching. She wasn't crying. There were no tears on her face, though whether that was dignity or hypothermia, he couldn't say. What he saw instead was something that hit him in the chest harder than the cold. She wasn't surprised to see him. She was watching him the way a person watches someone they've already decided not to trust. Ethan lowered the flashlight so it wasn't aimed directly at her face. "Hey," he said. "Brilliant opener." He winced at himself. She didn't answer. My name's Ethan. I live about 4 miles up this road." He pointed vaguely north as if that explained anything. "The last bus on this route ran at 4. There's nothing coming." "I know," she said. Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be, given that her lips were pale and her breath was coming in short, visible puffs. She said those 2 words, "I know," and they landed flat, like she was stating a fact she'd made her peace with. Like she'd been sitting there long enough that she'd already moved through the part where she expected help. That hit him different. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. A pause. She looked away from him out toward the road. "A while. A while like an hour. 2 hours." She didn't answer. Ethan did the math on the temperature. It had been in the low 20s since 5 o'clock, and the wind was pulling it lower. A wet coat. No gloves. An hour would have been serious. 2 would have been dangerous. "Ma'am," he said, and he kept his voice level, the way he'd learned to do at accident scenes, calm enough to think not, flat enough to seem like you don't care. "I need to know how long you've been sitting here, because depending on that answer, we may need to get you checked out." "Please don't call anyone." The words stopped him cold. Not because they were loud. She said it quietly, almost softly. But there was a sharpness underneath, a specific deliberate sharpness, that told him this wasn't fear of paramedics. This was something else entirely. He held the flashlight at his side and let his eyes adjust. She was watching him again now, measuring something. "Who would I be calling?" he asked. "The police," she said. "Or whoever. I don't want a report. I don't want any of that." Ethan crouched down, not all the way, just enough to get his eyes closer to her level, and said, "Can I ask why?" Her jaw tightened. "Because the person who left me here," she said carefully, "the way you say something you've been rehearsing, would use it against me." Silence. Somewhere behind Ethan. His truck idled in the dark. The sleet tapped against the plexiglass shelter. He looked at this woman, soaked, shivering alone on a county road in January, with a suitcase at her feet, and a wheelchair that had no business being outdoors in this weather, and he heard what she was actually saying underneath the words. Someone did this. Not an accident. Not a mix-up. Someone drove her here and left her. Ethan stood back up. He turned and looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. No headlights. No sign of anyone coming back. He turned back to her. "Okay," he said. "No police, no report." He picked up her suitcase. "Can I take this to my truck?" She stiffened. "I didn't say I was going with you." "You didn't," he agreed. "But you've been out here long enough that your hands are the color of printer paper, and unless someone's picking you up in the next few minutes, your options are getting narrower." He paused. "I've got a daughter at home, 8 years old. If you come with me, she's going to ask you 17 questions before you even get your coat off, and I am going to make you the worst cup of coffee you've ever had, and that's about as dangerous as my house gets." She stared at him. He waited. "You don't know me," she said. "I know you're freezing," he said. "That's enough for tonight." Her name came out in pieces on the drive back to his place. Sophia. Sophia Bennett. She said it the way people say their name when they've been going a while without using it slightly carefully, like checking that it still fit. She sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and her wet coat dripping onto his bench seat, and she stared out the window at the dark field scrolling past. He'd folded her wheelchair and wrestled it into the truck bed. It was heavier than he expected, and she'd watched him do it with an expression he couldn't quite read, and now she was sitting upright in the cab with the heater finally running properly, and she still wasn't warm. He could see it in her. The kind of cold that gets in past the skin. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked. He kept his eyes on the road. "Not particularly," she said. "Fair enough." Silence. The radio was off. He didn't turn it on. 2 minutes passed. Then she said, "He told me he needed time to think." Ethan kept driving. He drove me out here, she continued, and her voice was doing something complicated, not braking, but walking very carefully along the edge of braking. He said we needed to talk somewhere quiet away from the house. I thought... She stopped. I thought we were going to talk. Who is he? Ethan asked. My fiancé. A beat. Ex-fiancé, I suppose. He drove you to a bus stop on a county road in a blizzard and told you he needed to think. He drove me to a bus stop on a county road in a blizzard, she said, and then he drove away. She turned to look out the window again. He took my phone before he left, and my purse. He said he was holding on to them. He said he'd come back. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. He did not say what he was thinking. What he was thinking was not something a man said to a woman he'd just met. What he was thinking involved Ryan Collins. He didn't know the name yet, but he would sitting somewhere warm in a nice car with Sophia's phone and her purse, and the deliberate certainty of a man who had decided that another human being could be set aside like something he was done with. Instead, Ethan said, "How long ago did he leave?" She thought about it. Or maybe she was counting. Around 4, she said. Maybe 4:30. 3 hours. She'd been sitting in that shelter for 3 hours. You didn't flag anyone down, he asked. 2 cars passed, she said. They didn't stop. He didn't say anything to that either. They pulled up to his house a few minutes later, a 2-story Craftsman that he'd been slowly renovating for the last 4 years, still rough around a few edges, but solid with the porch light on because Mia always turned it on when it got dark. He saw it through the windshield and felt the complicated thing. He always felt coming home. Gratitude and grief wound together so tight he couldn't separate them anymore. He parked and came around to the passenger side. He pulled the wheelchair from the bed and set it up, and he opened the door for Sophia without making a production of it, without hovering. Without that particular brand of stiff helpfulness that he'd already clocked made her jaw tighten. She transferred from the seat to the chair with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing it long enough that she'd stopped thinking about it. He stepped back and gave her room. She didn't thank him for that. He suspected she appreciated it more than a thank you would have covered. They were halfway up the porch ramp he'd built it 2 years ago for his neighbor Jim, who'd had a knee replacement and never taken it down when the front door opened. Mia stood in the doorway in her pajamas, the ones with the little owls on them, holding a book she'd clearly just set down and staring at Sophia with the full and completely unguarded attention that only children can get away with. "Dad," she said, "you brought someone home." "I did," Ethan said. "Who is she?" "Her name is Sophia," he said. "She's going to stay with us for a bit." Mia considered this for approximately 1 second. "Okay," she said, and stepped back to make room in the doorway. Then to Sophia directly. "Do you want hot chocolate? Dad makes it from a packet, but I put the marshmallows in, so it's better." Sophia blinked, and for the first time since Ethan had found her, something changed in her face. It wasn't a smile exactly. It was something closer to surprise, the particular surprise of someone who has been braced for something difficult and received something simple instead. "Yes," Sophia said. "I would really like that." Ethan made dinner, while Mia gave Sophia the unofficial tour from the hallway. The living room, the bookshelf, the corner where Dad kept his project pile, which was mostly broken tools he was going to fix, but hadn't yet the photo of their dog Chester, who had died in the fall, and whose bowl was still by the door, because neither of them had quite managed to put it away. He could hear Mia's voice through the kitchen doorway, steady and easy and fearless. And he could hear Sophia answering shorter at first, then longer, then occasionally asking questions back. He stood at the stove and listened, and tried not to read too much into it. He put the pasta on. He found the frozen peas. He grilled the chicken in the cast iron because the broiler had been acting up since October, and he hadn't gotten around to fixing it. When he set the plates on the table, Mia had already pulled her chair slightly to the left to make space for Sophia's wheelchair without being asked. He saw Sophia notice that. He saw her press her lips together for just a moment. They ate. Mia talked about school, a project on the water cycle, a substitute teacher who'd mispronounced the word precipitation 4 times in a row, a disagreement with her best friend Dana about whether dolphins or elephants were smarter. Sophia said elephants had been documented grieving their dead, which Mia found fascinating and immediately devastating and wanted to know more about. Ethan watched the two of them talk and ate his pasta and didn't say much. After dinner, Mia went up to bed with a minimum of resistance, which he suspected had something to do with wanting to come back downstairs tomorrow morning and find Sophia still there. She hugged Ethan at the bottom of the stairs, then turned to Sophia. "Will you be here in the morning?" she asked. Sophia glanced at Ethan. "I think so," she said. "Good," Mia said, and went upstairs. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee, bad ones as advertised, and brought them to the living room. He sat in the armchair across from Sophia, and for a while, neither of them said anything. The storm was still going outside. He could hear it against the windows. "I should figure out where I'm going," Sophia said finally. "You don't have to figure that out tonight," he said. "I can't just stay here." "Why not?" She looked at him like that was a strange thing to say. "Because I don't know you," she said. "Because this isn't how things work. You don't take strangers into your home." "I used to run into burning buildings," he said. "I've been told I have a limited sense of self-preservation." She studied him for a moment. "You were a firefighter." "6 years. Got out when my wife died. Mia needed someone home more." He said it plainly, the way he always said it, with the practiced neutrality of a fact rather than a wound, though it was both. "So now I fix other people's houses instead." Something shifted in her expression. Not pity, he'd learned to spot pity in the last 5 years, and she wasn't doing it. More like recognition. Like someone who had also learned the particular vocabulary of a life that went sideways. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Thank you," he said. And then, because it seemed right to offer something back, "Tell me about the accident." She was quiet for a moment. 7 months ago, she said. March. I was driving back from a site visit. I'm an architect. Was an architect. I'm still... She stopped. Started again. I still think of myself that way. Force of habit. She looked down at her hands. A truck ran a red light. Hit me on the driver's side. I was in surgery for 11 hours. She said all of this with the clean precision of someone who has told the story enough times that the words have lost their edges. When I woke up, the doctors told me I'd sustained a spinal cord injury at T10. They said I might regain some function with time and therapy. They said... A pause. They said a lot of things. Ryan sat in the chair beside my bed and held my hand and said, "We're going to get through this together." "And then he didn't," Ethan said. "And then he didn't," she agreed. The fire in the wood stove made a small sound. The sleet kept coming. "How long between the accident and tonight?" he asked. 7 months, she said. "He was there at first. I believed him. He seemed genuine. He came to every appointment. He set up the accessible modifications in our condo. He told everyone we were adapting." She exhaled slowly. "But around month 3, he started talking about how much the modifications had cost. How the insurance wasn't covering everything. He started mentioning things I'd bought before the accident, design contracts I'd won, property investments my grandfather had left me. He was always just wondering about them, asking questions, just curious." Ethan said nothing. He was listening the way he'd learned to listen at accident scenes, not just to the words, but to what was underneath. "He started managing my accounts," she said. "He said it was because I was recovering and had enough to worry about. He said he was helping. I let him." Her voice was very even now. Too even. "I let him because I was exhausted. I let him because I thought that was what people who loved each other did. They helped each other." "What did you own?" Ethan asked carefully. "Before." "My firm," she said. "Partial ownership in 3 commercial properties downtown. The intellectual property rights to 17 design projects, still in active licensing. That alone generates about..." She paused. "Enough. It generates enough that it would be worth someone's time to take it from me." The word "take" landed in the room like a stone. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and looked at her directly. "Sophia," he said. "What he did tonight driving you out there, that wasn't just him leaving, was it?" She met his eyes. "No," she said. I don't think it was. What do you think it was? A long pause. I think he needed me to disappear, she said. I think he's been moving things around for long enough that he needs me either gone or... She stopped. Or discredited. If a judge decides I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs, everything Ryan has already moved becomes his to keep. She said it with the cool precision of someone who had spent 3 hours in the freezing dark turning it over. He told my physical therapist last month that he was concerned about my mental state. He told my doctor that I was showing signs of depression that were affecting my decision-making. He was building something. I just didn't see it fast enough. Ethan sat back in his chair. He thought about a man in a warm car driving away from that bus stop. He thought about what he'd found there, not an abandoned wheelchair, not a woman in distress. He'd found someone who'd been placed there precisely and deliberately, like a piece removed from a chessboard. He thought about Mia upstairs asleep with her owls and her library books and her completely unstrategic way of deciding to trust people. Okay, he said. Sophia looked at him. Okay, she repeated. Yeah. He stood up and took both coffee cups to the kitchen. He came back and stood in the doorway. The guest room's at the end of the hall. The bathroom's next to it. There's a grab bar on the left side of the shower. I put it in for my dad when he visited last spring. I'll get you some dry clothes. He paused. Tomorrow morning when you're ready, you can tell me exactly how much you remember about your financial accounts. And then we're going to figure out what he took. She stared at him. Ethan, she said. Why are you doing this? He considered it. Because 2 cars drove past you tonight, he said. And I've been one of those cars before in my life and I'm trying to be something different. He put his hand on the doorframe. Get some sleep. You're safe here. He went to find her dry clothes. She sat alone in the living room for a moment, her hands still in her lap, and outside the storm hammered the windows of the house. And for the first time in 7 months, Sophia Bennett was inside and warm. And the man who had put her in the cold didn't know where she was. She slept for 11 hours. Ethan knew, because he checked not in any intrusive way, just a glance down the hall at 7 a.m. when he got up with Mia, and again at 8. And the door was still closed, and he figured that was what 11 hours of adrenaline collapse looked like, and he left her to it. Mia ate cereal and whispered her questions. Is she okay? She will be. What happened to her? That's her story to tell. Is she staying? Ethan poured his coffee. Let's take it one day at a time. Mia absorbed this. That means yes, she said, and went back to her cereal with the supreme confidence of a child who knows when she's reading a room correctly. Sophia appeared at 9:30, navigating the hallway with a quiet efficiency that told him she'd spent time mapping the layout while everyone else was asleep. She was wearing the clothes he'd left out an old flannel of his that was big on her yoga pants from a bag of his late wife Claire's things he'd never managed to donate. He'd felt something about that pulling them out of the bin. He'd held them for a minute. Then he'd folded them and set them outside the door and not thought about it more than that. Mia looked up from the table. Good morning, she said. Dad made eggs. They're okay. He burns them sometimes, but not today. They look great, Sophia said. Do you like coffee? Very much. Dad's is bad, but... Mia, Ethan said. But you get used to it. Mia finished and smiled at Sophia with absolute sincerity. Sophia sat at the table, and Ethan put a plate in front of her, and she ate, and said almost nothing for the first 10 minutes, and he didn't push. He'd learned through firefighting, through fatherhood, through all of it, that people who've been running on emergency for too long need to eat before they can talk. When she set her fork down, she looked at him across the table. I need to make a list, she said. Of everything I remember. Account numbers, property records, the names of his attorneys. She paused. And I need to make a phone call. My best friend Lydia. She doesn't know what happened. She's been texting me for 3 days and I haven't answered because Ryan was monitoring my phone. Okay, Ethan said. He slid his phone across the table to her. She picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then looked at him. He told me nobody would believe me, she said. He said that if I tried to tell anyone what was happening, I'd look paranoid. He said the wheelchair made me... She stopped. Made you what? Ethan asked. Easier to dismiss, she said. His word was fragile. He used that word a lot, toward the end. Ethan thought of 6 words and swallowed all of them. Make your call, he said instead. Then we'll make your list. She dialed. A woman answered on the second ring, and even from across the table, Ethan could hear the relief in her voice, sharp and immediate, the way relief sounds when it's been fighting back fear for a while. Oh my God, Sophia, where are you? Are you okay? I'm okay, Sophia said. I'm okay. I'll explain everything. She looked at Ethan. He nodded once and got up to give her the room. He took his coffee to the porch and stood in the cold January morning looking at the road. Somewhere down that road, Ryan Collins was waking up in a warm house with Sophia's phone and her cards and the certainty of a man who thought he had successfully removed an obstacle. Ethan drank his coffee. The morning was very quiet, and then he went back inside because there was work to do. I didn't know yet how deep it went. He didn't know about the documents Ryan had forged, or the doctors he'd coached, or the accounts he'd been quietly draining for months while he told Sophia she was too stressed to look at the numbers. He didn't know about the attorney Ryan had already retained, or the affidavit he'd drafted, or the very specific legal strategy he'd been constructing for 5 months, with the patience of a man who believed he would never be caught. But Sophia knew, and now she wasn't alone. And the man who had left her in the cold was about to discover that the woman he'd tried to erase had a very good memory. And a new address he didn't know. The morning after the storm, Ethan Parker sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, a pen, and a woman who remembered everything. That was the first thing he noticed about Sophia Bennett. Her memory was not the memory of someone who had been broken. It was the memory of someone who had been paying attention carefully, quietly for a very long time. The kind of attention you develop when you realize too late that the person sitting across from you has been lying to your face and smiling while he did it. She held his coffee mug in both hands, and she talked. And Ethan wrote, account numbers, property addresses. The name of the law firm Ryan Collins kept on retainer Hargrove and Associates, downtown Denver, a firm that specialized in estate and asset management. The dates. The specific dates when Ryan had asked her to sign things she hadn't read carefully enough. The name of her physical therapist, Janet Kowalski, who had called Sophia 2 weeks ago sounding strange and careful, who had said, I just want you to know that whatever you're going through, I'm always on your side, and hung up before Sophia could ask her what that meant. He talked to her, Sophia said. He told her something. I don't know exactly what, but her voice... She stopped. I've known Janet for 6 months. She's not a careful person. She's direct and loud, and she calls things what they are. When she sounded careful, I knew. What do you think he told her? Ethan asked. That I was unstable, Sophia said. That my injury had affected my cognition. That he was worried about me. She set the mug down. He said it to my primary care doctor too, Dr. Feliz. About 2 months ago, Ryan came to an appointment I thought was routine, and he sat in the chair next to me, and he spent 15 minutes asking Dr. Feliz questions about how spinal cord injuries can sometimes affect emotional regulation and decision-making. She looked at Ethan steadily. He framed it as concern. He was very good at framing things as concern. Ethan looked at the legal pad. He'd filled 4 pages already. Sophia, he said. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it straight. Okay. The properties, the design licensing, the inheritance from your grandfather. Do you have documentation? Anything in your own name that he couldn't have touched yet? She was quiet for a moment. My grandfather's estate went through probate 2 years ago, she said. I have a copy of the will and the transfer documents at my firm. Not the condo. Ryan has access to everything at the condo. But my office. I have a filing cabinet there with a lock. The key is... She paused. The key is on a keychain in a coffee mug on my desk. A mug that says World's Okayest Architect that my assistant Marcus gave me as a joke. Ethan almost smiled. Has Ryan ever been to your office? 3 times, she said. None recently. He doesn't like going downtown. A pause. He always said the parking was terrible. I thought it was just a quirk. Now I think he didn't want anyone at my firm to see us together regularly. He was managing optics. The word landed hard. Ethan underlined it on the pad. Managing optics. This wasn't a man who'd panicked and made a bad decision in a cold moment. This was a man who had been constructing something for months, brick by brick, and had decided the night before last that the structure was ready. That he could remove Sophia from the equation and the whole thing would hold. He'd miscalculated the weather. He'd miscalculated Ethan. And he had very badly miscalculated Sophia Bennett. I'm going to make some calls, Ethan said. He stood up and took his pad to the counter. I know someone, a detective. She helped me with something a few years back, a situation with my property. After Claire died, some title issues. She's sharp, and she's discreet, and she owes me a favor. He glanced back. If that's okay with you. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Why do you keep asking if things are okay with me? She said. He frowned. Because they are. Your call to make. Ryan never asked, she said simply. He just decided. Ethan didn't respond to that right away. He picked up his phone. Her name's Laura Mitchell. She's with the county, but she freelances on civil cases. I'm going to give her a short version of this and see if she'll meet today. Today. The longer we wait, Ethan said, the more time he has to move things. Sophia's jaw tightened. Call her. He stepped into the hallway and dialed. Laura Mitchell picked up on the third ring with the voice of someone who had already been awake for 2 hours and was on her second cup of coffee and did not have time for preamble. Parker, it's been a while. I need an hour of your time, he said. Today if you can. A pause. You in trouble, not me. He leaned against the wall. A woman I found last night at the bus shelter on County Road 7, in the storm. Someone left her there, Laura, in a wheelchair. Took her phone, took her purse, drove away. Silence. Then, left her. Intentionally, he said. And that's the least of it. Another silence. He could hear her thinking. I can be there at noon, she said. He exhaled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this is what it sounds like, Parker, it's going to get complicated. Yeah, he said. I figured. He hung up and went back to the kitchen. Sophia was still sitting at the table, but she'd pulled the legal pad toward her and was reading through what he'd written. Checking it. Correcting a date in the margin with precise, small handwriting. She's coming at noon, he said. Sophia nodded without looking up. She finished the correction, set the pen down. Then she said, There's something I didn't tell you last night. He sat back down. 3 weeks ago, she said. I found something in Ryan's home office. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a phone charger, and his desk drawer was already half open. She folded her hands on the table. There was a folder. I only had a few seconds before I heard him coming, so I didn't read it carefully. But I saw my name on the front, and I saw the words, Power of Attorney on the first page. Ethan went very still. How was having power of attorney documents prepared, she said. Without telling me, without asking me, documents that if signed would give him full legal control over my medical decisions, my financial decisions, everything. She looked at him. I closed the drawer and I never said anything, because I thought... She stopped. I told myself I was misreading it. I told myself he was being proactive, being cautious because of the injury. I told myself it was love. But you took a photo, Ethan said quietly. It wasn't a question. Something in the way she was holding herself told him. She looked at him. I took a photo, she said. With the phone he took from me last night. Ethan leaned forward. Is it backed up anywhere? Cloud storage, email. I back everything up to my Google account automatically, she said. Ryan doesn't know the password. He has access to my personal email, but not my work account. It backs up there. She straightened. If the photos are still on the server, I can access them from any browser. Ethan stood up so fast the chair scraped. Come on, he said. He had a laptop on the kitchen counter. He opened it, spun it toward her, and stepped back. Her fingers moved fast. She knew exactly where she was going. She logged into her account, navigated to the photo library, scrolled back 3 weeks. Her face was absolutely focused, completely still, the way a person's face gets when they are doing something that matters enormously, and they are refusing to let their hands shake. Then she stopped scrolling. "There," she said. Ethan looked at the screen. The photo was slightly blurry, taken quickly at an angle, but it was readable. A folder cover with Sophia Bennett typed across the top in clean black font. And below it, 2 lines visible on the first page of the document. Inside, durable power of attorney, financial and medical principal. Sophia Ann Bennett. Agent, Ryan Thomas Collins. Ethan stared at it. "He had an attorney draft this," he said. "Hargrove and Associates," Sophia said. "Same firm. Look at the letterhead." He looked. She was right. "He was going to get you to sign it," Ethan said. "Or," he stopped. "Or have someone declare me incompetent to refuse," she finished. "Yes, that's what I think." She closed the laptop carefully. "If he had that document and a doctor's testimony that I was mentally compromised from the injury, he wouldn't even need my signature." The kitchen was very quiet. From upstairs came the sound of Mia moving around in her room. The small, ordinary sounds of a child on a Saturday morning. A drawer opening music from a tablet, her feet crossing the floor. Ethan looked at those sounds. He thought about Ryan Collins, who had a plan in a folder in a desk drawer, who had been sitting across from Sophia at dinner tables, and in doctors' offices, and in physical therapy waiting rooms, building a case brick by deliberate brick. "I need you to email that photo to yourself," Ethan said. 3 different accounts if you have them, and I need you to write down everything you just told me, every detail, every date, everything you remember about that folder before Laura gets here." "I'm already doing it," Sophia said. She'd opened the laptop again. He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold, but he drank it anyway. He stood at the counter and thought about something she'd said the night before. "He told me nobody would believe me. He said the wheelchair made me fragile." Ethan looked at the woman sitting at his kitchen table, who had spent a night in a blizzard and still woke up with the account numbers memorized. Who had taken a photo with the presence of mind of someone who was already preparing for war 3 weeks before she knew it had been declared. Who was right now composing a precise, detailed chronological document with steady hands and a pen she'd borrowed from his junk drawer. Ryan Collins had made a fatal error. I thought the wheelchair was the whole story. He never considered what was inside it. Laura Mitchell arrived at 11:53, which meant she'd left early, which meant she'd taken the call seriously from the first sentence. She was 45, broad-shouldered with short, silver-shot hair and the practiced stillness of someone who had sat across from a lot of liars and learned to let the silence do the work. She sat down at the kitchen table across from Sophia, set a small recorder on the table, and looked at her for a moment before saying anything. "My name is Laura Mitchell," she said. "I've been a detective with Garfield County for 19 years. Before we start, I want to tell you something." She folded her hands. "I've worked 17 domestic cases involving financial abuse. I know what it looks like. I know how hard it is to talk about. And I know that the first thing most people say is I should have seen it sooner." She paused. "You're not here because you were foolish. You're here because someone was patient and deliberate and very careful. That's on him, not you." Sophia looked at her steadily. "All right," she said. "Tell me everything," Laura said. "In order. Start from when you met him." And Sophia did. She talked for 40 minutes without stopping. Ethan sat at the far end of the table with his coffee and his legal pad, and he didn't interrupt. Laura asked questions, clean, precise, never leading, and Sophia answered them with the same economy she'd used all morning. Dates, names, specific conversations. The exact wording Ryan had used with Dr. Feliz. The name of the notary on the power of attorney letterhead. The bank where Ryan had told her 3 months ago that he'd consolidated their accounts for tax purposes. When she finished, Laura sat back and looked at her recorder for a moment. Then she looked at Ethan. "You said you found her at the County Road 7 shelter," she said. "Around 7:15, he said. She'd been there since roughly 4 o'clock. 3 hours, Laura said. "In those temperatures." She looked back at Sophia. Did he make any verbal statements before he left you there? Anything specific about why or about what he intended to do? He said he needed time to think, Sophia said. He said he'd come back. He knew he wasn't coming back. And he took your phone and your purse? Yes. Took them, Laura repeated carefully. Not you left them in the car. He reached across and took them out of my hands, Sophia said, deliberately. Laura wrote something in her notepad. She underlined it. Then she said, I want to be clear about something. What he did last night, leaving you in those conditions without means of communication or funds in a medical situation that requires equipment, that's not just abandonment. Depending on how the DA wants to read it, that edges toward criminal neglect. Maybe further. She paused. But the financial piece is what's going to matter most. If those power of attorney documents were prepared without your knowledge, and with the intent to use incompetency claims to seize your assets, we're talking about fraud. Potentially elder financial abuse statutes, those apply to disabled persons in Colorado, regardless of age. Sophia nodded slowly. What do we do first? First, Laura said, I need to verify that your firm's files haven't been accessed or tampered with. Your business attorney, do you have one separate from Ryan's firm? Yes, Catherine Lund. She handled the intellectual property contracts. Call her, today. Tell her to put a hold on any requests for document transfer or account access until you speak with her personally. Laura looked at her steadily. Collins may not know you're here yet, but the moment he realizes you didn't disappear quietly, he's going to move. He has probably already made some calls this morning. The word morning landed like a stone in still water. It was 12:41 p.m. Ryan Collins had had a 16-hour head start. Sophia picked up Ethan's phone and dialed Catherine Lund before Laura finished the sentence. Ethan watched her the way her voice shifted when the call connected, going from controlled to completely authoritative in a single breath, the way she gave Catherine the exact information she needed, in precise numbered points, the way she said, do not release anything to anyone until you hear from me directly, with a quiet certainty that left zero room for debate. I thought this is who she was before the accident. This is who she still is. He thought Ryan Collins is the stupidest smart man I've ever encountered. Catherine Lund called back 11 minutes later. Sophia answered immediately and listened, and Ethan watched her face. Watched something move through it, not panic, not shock. Something colder. Something that looked like confirmation. When, she said. A pause. All 3 properties, she said. Another pause. Who submitted it? She listened. Her hand tightened once on the phone. Okay, she said. Don't process anything. I'll be in contact. She hung up and set the phone on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when you're making a decision about how hard you're going to let it hit you. 2 days ago, she said, Ryan submitted a request to Catherine's office to transfer the licensing rights on 11 of my 17 active design contracts to a holding company. She paused. A holding company he created 6 weeks ago, without telling me. The kitchen was completely silent. Laura's pen moved across her notepad. The holding company name, she said. Bennett Holdings, LLC, Sophia said. Her voice was completely flat. He spelled my last name wrong. 1 T instead of 2. He was sloppy. She looked up. He thought I'd never see it. Something shifted in Ethan's chest. Not anger exactly, though that was part of it. Something more precise. The specific outrage of watching someone be underestimated in a way that is both insulting and, as it turns out, catastrophic for the person doing the underestimating. Catherine hasn't processed the transfer, Laura asked. No, she said it came in Thursday and she was going to reach me Friday to confirm. She'd been trying to call the number Ryan gave her. Sophia looked at Ethan. The number he gave her was my cell phone, the one he took. Laura put her pen down. He was going to approve his own transfer request, she said, by impersonating you. Yes, Sophia said. 3 people sat at a kitchen table in Willow Creek, Colorado. Outside, the storm from the night before had cleared and left everything white and clean and very quiet. Inside, something was solidifying. Not just a plan, something underneath the plan. The specific gravity that comes when a situation stops being something that happened to you and starts being something you are going to respond to. I want to file, Sophia said. Whatever you need from me, testimony, documentation, access to my records, I want to file. Laura nodded. I'll start the paperwork today. Emergency financial fraud complaint petition to freeze the Bennett Holdings LLC account and a report on the abandonment incident. The DA will make the call on charges, but I want everything documented immediately. She looked at Sophia. I need you to stay somewhere he doesn't know about. Do you have family in the area? My parents are in Phoenix, Sophia said. My sister is in Seattle. But if Ryan knows I've surfaced, he'll call all of them. He knows my family. Then stay here, Ethan said. Both women looked at him. He was looking at his legal pad. He turned it over. Stay here, he said again. He doesn't know about me. He doesn't know this address. You said yourself he never came out this way. He looked at Sophia directly. Stay here until Laura has enough in place that it doesn't matter where you are. Ethan, my house has a ramp, he said. The bathroom's already adapted. Mia wants you here. She's going to ask me 17 times today where you are if you leave. He paused. And I've got a spare room and a bad coffee maker and approximately 0 reasons to say no. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Laura. Is that safe? She asked. Being here, right now, Laura said. It's probably the safest place you could be. Collins doesn't have this address, and Ethan's not in your social network. Your phone contacts anything Ryan could access. She paused. I'd avoid all your regular accounts and cards for now. Can you manage that? I have emergency cash, Sophia said. In the lining of my suitcase. I put it there 6 weeks ago. She looked at the table. I think I knew. On some level, I think I'd been preparing for something even if I couldn't name it. Laura looked at her with the quiet recognition of someone who had heard that sentence, or its cousin, in 19 years of domestic cases. Most people do, she said. The instinct is usually right. The hard part is trusting it in time. She stood and gathered her notepad and her recorder. I'll call you by 5, she said to Ethan. Then to Sophia. Don't contact Ryan. Don't contact anyone you think might tell him where you are. If he calls Ethan's number. He doesn't have it, Ethan said. Keep it that way. She shook Sophia's hand. You're not fragile, she said. Just so you know. Whatever he told people. Sophia looked at her. I know, she said. And this time when she said it, it didn't sound like a woman sitting alone in the freezing dark. It sounded like something that had been true all along finally being said out loud. Laura left. The front door closed. The house settled back into its quiet. From upstairs came the sound of Mia's feet on the floor, and then her voice calling down the stairs. Dad, is the detective lady still here? Can I come down? I want to ask Sophia something. Ethan called back. Come on down, Bug. Mia appeared at the bottom of the stairs in her owl pajamas, which she had apparently declined to change out of all morning, holding a large hardback book about famous buildings of the world. She walked directly to Sophia and held it out. I looked you up, she said. Sophia Bennett, architect. There's a building you designed in this book. Page 214. I put a sticky note. She looked at Sophia with absolute seriousness. It's really good. The windows are amazing. Sophia took the book. She opened it to page 214. The sticky note was a small pink square with a smiley face drawn on it in green crayon. She looked at the page. It was the Caldwell Community Center completed 4 years ago. It had taken her 18 months to design. She had stood on the roof the day they finished the glass installation and cried because the light came through exactly the way she'd imagined it when she was sitting at her drafting table at 2 a.m, drinking cold coffee and arguing with the structural engineer over email. She had not looked at a photo of it since the accident. She looked at it now. The windows were the hardest part, she said. Her voice was very quiet. I almost gave up on them 3 times. Why didn't you? Mia asked. Sophia looked at the photo for another moment. Because they were right, she said. Even when they were hard, they were still right. Mia nodded as if that was the most reasonable thing she'd ever heard. I think you should design more buildings, she said. You're good at it, And then she climbed up onto the couch beside Sophia's chair and opened the book to page 1 and said, "Can you tell me about the other ones? I have questions." Ethan stood in the doorway of his living room. He looked at his daughter, and the woman his daughter had decided with the uncomplicated certainty of an 8-year-old was worth keeping. He thought about a book with a sticky note on page 214. He thought about a woman who had put cash in the lining of her suitcase 6 weeks ago because somewhere underneath the fear she was already getting ready to fight. He thought about Ryan Collins, who at this exact moment, sitting in a warm house with a stolen phone and a folder full of documents, believed he had won. He went to the kitchen and poured himself another cup of bad coffee. His phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. He answered it. Silence on the other end for 2 seconds. Then a man's voice, smooth, measured, the kind of voice that was used to being the most composed person in the room. "I'm looking for Sophia Bennett," the voice said. "I believe you may have had some contact with her." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. He said nothing. "My name is Ryan Collins," the voice said. "She's my fiancée. She's disabled and she went missing last night during the storm. I'm very worried about her." Ethan stood in his kitchen. He looked at the living room doorway, where he could hear Mia asking Sophia what kind of glass they used for buildings that had to face the sun. Then he said very calmly, "I think you have the wrong number." And he hung up. He set the phone face down on the counter. 16 hours. Ryan had lasted exactly 16 hours before he panicked, which meant Laura Mitchell had less time than they thought. Ethan picked up the phone again and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Mitchell." "He just called me," Ethan said. A beat of silence. Then, "How did he get your number?" "I don't know yet." "What did he say?" "He said she was missing. He said he was worried." Ethan's voice was flat. He was smooth. Very smooth. "Of course he was." Another pause. "Ethan, if he has your number, he can get your address. It might take him a day, maybe 2. But, how long do you need?" Ethan asked. Laura was quiet for 3 seconds. "Give me 48 hours, she said. "I'll have enough for an emergency injunction and a fraud complaint filed with the DA by then. Once that's on record, it doesn't matter what he knows." "You've got 48 hours, Ethan said. He hung up and stood in his kitchen for a moment. Through the doorway, he heard Sophia's voice explaining the coefficient of thermal expansion and why it mattered for large glass installations, and Mia's voice saying, "That's actually really cool," with complete sincerity. Ryan Collins had his plan. Now they had one too. And 48 hours was more than enough for a woman who had survived 3 hours in a January blizzard and woken up the next morning with every account number memorized. More than enough. The call from Ryan Collins had lasted 11 seconds. 11 seconds was enough to change everything about how Ethan understood the situation. Because a man who was genuinely worried about a missing fiancée would have asked questions. He would have said, "Where did you see her? Is she okay? What hospital? What shelter? Anything." He would have been desperate in the way real fear sounds, ragged, uncontrolled, spilling over the edges. Ryan Collins had asked nothing. He'd stated his story clean and prepared like a man reading from a script he'd already rehearsed. And when Ethan said wrong number, Ryan hadn't pushed, hadn't asked him to wait, hadn't made a sound. He'd just hung up, which meant he wasn't looking for information. He already knew Ethan had her. Ethan walked back into the living room and stood in the doorway. Sophia was still on the couch, Mia, the big architecture book, open across both their laps. Mia was asking something about load-bearing walls. Sophia was answering with the patient, precise attention of someone who took the question seriously because the person asking it deserved to be taken seriously. Ethan said quietly, "Sophia." She looked up. She read his face immediately. "Mia dear," she said, her voice perfectly level. "Can you go get me a glass of water, and take your time, I want the cold water, so run it for a minute first." Mia looked between them with the radar of a child who knew something had shifted. "Okay," she said. She slid off the couch and padded to the kitchen. Ethan crossed the room and crouched so his voice wouldn't carry. "He called," he said. "My cell number. He knows you're here." Sophia didn't flinch. She absorbed it the way she absorbed most things, with a stillness that wasn't shock. It was calculation. Her eyes moved slightly, the way eyes move when a person is rapidly reorganizing information. "How did he get your number?" she said. "I don't know yet, but Laura thinks he can get the address in a day or two at most." "Then we have a day," she said. "Maybe less." She nodded once. "What does Laura need from me?" "Everything you haven't already given her. Any witnesses. Anyone who saw him behave strangely toward you in the last few months. Anyone who heard the things he said to doctors." "Janet Kowalski," she said immediately. "My physical therapist. She called me 2 weeks ago sounding like she was being careful with every word. She knows something." She paused. "And Marcus, your assistant. I was in the office the day Ryan came in asking about my intellectual property contracts. Ryan didn't know Marcus was there. He was in the back. He heard everything. I never asked him about it because I was still telling myself I was misreading things." Her jaw tightened. "I was wrong to wait." "You're not waiting now," Ethan said. Mia came back with the water, careful and deliberate, not spilling. She handed it to Sophia and looked at her dad, and then at Sophia again. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Sophia looked at her. "We're working on it," she said. "That's the honest answer." Mia thought about that. "Okay," she said. "Do you want me to help?" "You already are," Sophia said. "More than you know." Mia accepted that with a small nod and went back to her book, and Ethan straightened and went to the kitchen counter and called Laura Mitchell for the second time in 20 minutes. It was 1:47 in the afternoon. They had maybe 36 hours. Laura picked up before the first ring finished. "Talk to me." "He had my number," Ethan said. He wasn't asking questions. He already knew. A beat. "He tracked your plate," she said. "He's smart enough to hire someone and rich enough to do it fast. If he had someone watching the road last night." She stopped. "Or the shelter has a traffic camera. County put them up 2 summers ago. He could have pulled footage." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Can he access county camera footage?" "Not legally," Laura said. "But a man with enough money and enough motive doesn't always need legal." She was already moving. He could hear it in her voice, the quick, sharp sound of papers, a chair, a door. "I'm filing the emergency injunction tonight instead of tomorrow. I need Sophia's signature on 3 documents. Can you get her to my office?" "Is that safe, moving her?" "Safer than waiting. He has your address or he's close to it. My office is a county building with a badge reader and 2 uniforms at the front desk." A pause. "Can you be here by 3? Ethan looked at the clock. It was a 40-minute drive. "We'll be there at 2:55, he said. He hung up and went to the living room door. "Sophia, we need to go." She was already closing the book. Ethan got Mia's coat and called his neighbor Helen, who was 63 and retired, and had watched Mia approximately 1,000 times and never once complained. And Helen said, "Of course, send her over. I made cookies." Mia went without argument, which was itself a sign that she understood something serious was happening and had decided the best way to help was to make it easier. At the door she stopped and looked back at Sophia. "You'll be here when I get back?" she asked. Sophia met her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I'll be here." Mia nodded and went. Ethan loaded the wheelchair into the truck bed, and they were on the road by 2:08, the January afternoon flat and gray and cold around them. Sophia sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead and said nothing for the first 10 minutes. Then she said, "He's going to try to discredit this. Whatever Laura files, he's going to respond by saying I'm unstable, that the injury compromised my judgment, that I ran away from home and invented a conspiracy because I couldn't cope." "Let him," Ethan said. "You say that like it's simple." "No," he said. "I say it because you have documents, witnesses, and a detective who's worked 17 of these cases and knows exactly what his playbook looks like." He glanced at her. "He's been building his version for 6 months. You built yours in 12 hours, and yours has photographs." She was quiet. "He's going to be very convincing," she said. "He's always been very convincing." "I believe you," Ethan said. "Laura believes you. The documents believe you." Another silence. My parents don't know any of this, she said. They liked Ryan. My father played golf with him twice. My mother told me at Christmas that she'd never seen me so settled. She exhaled. They're going to feel like this is their fault. They're going to blame themselves for not seeing it. That's his fault too, Ethan said. That's what people like that do. They make everyone around them feel responsible for the damage they cause. She looked at him. You sound like you know. He drove for a moment. My wife died in a car accident, he said. Drunk driver. Guy had 3 prior DUIs, and every person who knew him said afterward that they'd seen it coming, that they should have done something, that if they'd just said the right thing to him at the right moment. He paused. None of that was their fault, and they spent years believing it was. Because that's what happens when someone else's choices blow a hole in your life. You stand in the hole and try to figure out what you did wrong. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. I'm sorry, she said. About your wife. Thank you, he said, the way he always said it. And then because she'd given him something real, he gave it back. She would have liked you. Claire was an engineer. She had the same thing you have, the way you look at a problem, like it's a puzzle that already has an answer, and you just haven't found it yet. He glanced over. She would have said Ryan Collins is an idiot who underestimated his opponent. Sophia turned back to the window. After a moment, she said very quietly, I'm going to cry in approximately 30 seconds, and I would prefer you not look at me when I do. Road needs my full attention anyway, Ethan said, and kept his eyes straight ahead. She cried for almost exactly 30 seconds. Quietly, with the controlled restraint of someone who had not allowed themselves to cry in a very long time, and was now giving herself a specific measured amount of space to do it. Then she took a breath and was done. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They drove the rest of the way in a silence that was not uncomfortable. Laura Mitchell's office was on the 2nd floor of the county building, past the badge reader and the 2 uniforms, exactly as promised, in a room that smelled like old coffee and printer toner, and had a whiteboard covered in case notations that Laura didn't bother to erase. She shook Sophia's hand, spread 3 documents on the desk, and walked her through each one with the brisk efficiency of someone who understood that time was the variable they could least afford to waste. The first document was the emergency financial fraud complaint naming Ryan Collins and Bennett Holdings, LLC. The second was a petition to freeze all assets transferred from Sophia's accounts or firm in the previous 90 days. The third was a formal witness statement covering the events of the previous night. The drive, the bus stop, the phone, the purse, all of it in legal language that made it solid and real in a way that Sophia's own voice couldn't fully make it yet. Sophia read every word before she signed. She asked 2 questions about the asset freeze language and made 1 correction to a date. Laura made the correction without comment. When it was done, Laura stapled the documents, set them in a folder, and looked at Sophia across the desk. I reached Janet Kowalski an hour ago, she said. Sophia went still. And she talked. Laura's voice was level. She said Ryan Collins called her approximately 6 weeks ago, presented himself as your medical advocate, and told her that you were exhibiting signs of cognitive decline related to your injury. He asked her to document any incidents where you seemed confused, agitated, or irrational during your sessions. A pause. He told her it was for your protection. The room was very quiet. She didn't do it, Laura continued. She told him she had no concerns about your cognitive function and that her patient records were confidential. He thanked her and hung up. She paused. But she didn't tell you either. Because she thought it would upset me, Sophia said. She said she didn't want to add to your stress. Sophia closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them. Is she willing to make a statement? Already done, Laura said. She emailed me a signed statement 40 minutes ago. She's also willing to testify. Something shifted in Sophia's posture. Minute, but real. Marcus, she said. I haven't reached him yet. Do you have a direct number? Sophia took Ethan's phone and pulled the number from memory without hesitating. Laura dialed from her desk. Marcus Reyes picked up on the second ring. He was 27 years old, had been Sophia's assistant for 3 years, and when Laura introduced herself and said she was calling regarding Sophia Bennett, he said before she could say another word, "Is she okay? Because I have been waiting for someone to call me for 6 weeks." Laura put him on speaker without being asked. "Tell me what you heard," she said. Marcus talked for 11 minutes. He had been in the back room of Sophia's firm on a Tuesday afternoon in November when Ryan Collins arrived and asked the receptionist to look at some files. The receptionist had let him in. Ryan had been there before he was Sophia's fiancé. There was no protocol against it. Marcus had come out to get his jacket and stopped in the doorway when he heard Ryan on his phone. Ryan's back was to him. He never knew Marcus was there. Ryan had said to whoever was on the other end, "The licensing transfers can go through Bennett Holdings as planned. She's not going to notice until it's too late, and by then the competency filing will already be in." A pause. Then, "I'm not worried about her. She's in a wheelchair, David. What's she going to do?" The room was completely silent. Ethan looked at the floor. He felt something move through him that was not quite anger and not quite grief, and was somehow both. "Marcus," Laura said carefully, "are you willing to make a formal statement?" "I tried," Marcus said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I went to the police 2 weeks ago. I told them what I heard. They said without more evidence, it was a domestic matter and they couldn't open an investigation." Laura wrote something on her notepad and underlined it twice. "Who did you speak to?" she said. "Officer at the front desk. He didn't take a report. He said I should suggest to Sophia that she speak to a family attorney." Marcus paused. "I called Sophia 3 times after that. Ryan always answered her phone. He said she was resting and would call me back. She never called back because she never knew." Laura looked at Sophia. Sophia was sitting with her hands flat on her thighs, and her eyes very steady, and her jaw set in a way that Ethan was beginning to recognize the specific expression of a person who has received information that is painful and has decided that pain is not going to be the point of the next 5 minutes. "Marcus," Sophia said, "I'm here. I'm okay. And I need you to write down everything you just said and email it to Detective Mitchell tonight." "Sophia." His voice broke fully this time. "I'm so sorry. I should have—" "You tried," she said. "That matters. Write it down. Tonight." "I will," he said. "I will, I promise." Laura ended the call. She sat back and looked at her notepad for a moment, then looked at both of them. "I need to tell you something," she said. "The officer Marcus spoke to 2 weeks ago. I know who handled that desk that day." She paused. "His name is Officer Dennis Crane. He's been with the department for 12 years. He also did 3 years of private security work before that." Another pause. "For a firm called Collins Risk and Asset Management." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Ethan looked at Laura. "Ryan owns a security firm," he said. "Owned. He sold it 4 years ago when he pivoted to real estate investment." She kept her eyes on her notepad. "But Crane worked for him, directly, for 3 years." The shape of it assembled itself in the room like something cold taking form. Ryan Collins hadn't just been building a financial trap. He had a contact inside the county police department. A man who had already quietly killed one attempt to report him. A man who, if Ryan had his address, could tell him things a private investigator would need days to find. Ethan said it first. "He got my number through Crane." "That's my guess," Laura said. "Crane has access to the county traffic camera system." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet. But proving it isn't what I need to do tonight." She straightened. "What I need to do tonight is make sure this complaint goes to the DA's office directly bypassing the department desk entirely. And I need to make one call to a colleague in Denver who handles exactly this kind of case and has no connection to Crane or Collins." She looked at Sophia. "The moment I file tonight, Ryan's attorney will know. He'll move quickly. You need to be somewhere that cannot be easily accessed." "She's staying with me," Ethan said. "Your home address is likely already compromised," Laura said. "Then we won't be at my home address." Both women looked at him. He pulled out his phone and dialed. 3 rings. Then a man's voice, gruff and warm. "Ethan, everything all right?" "Tom," he said. "I need a favor, a big one. Tom Briggs was 58 years old, a retired sheriff's deputy, and owned 40 acres of land 12 miles outside Willow Creek, with a guest cabin that he rented to hunters in the fall and left empty all winter. He and Ethan had been friends for 11 years since Ethan's first year on the fire department. Tom had been at Claire's funeral. He had shown up the week after with 2 weeks' worth of frozen meals and said nothing except, "You don't have to talk, I'll just be here." And he had meant it. He listened to 30 seconds of what Ethan told him and said, "Bring her over. Cabin's heated, stocked, and nobody outside this county knows it exists. I'll have the lights on." Ethan said, "Thank you." Tom said, "That's what this is for," and hung up. It was 4:22 in the afternoon. They collected Mia from Helen's house. Helen pressed a container of cookies into Sophia's hands and said, "You look like you could use something sweet, honey," with the directness of a woman who had seen enough of life to dispense with small talk, and they drove out to Tom's property as the last of the afternoon light flattened across the frozen fields. Tom met them at the cabin door. He shook Ethan's hand and nodded at Sophia, with the respectful brevity of a man who understood the situation without needing it explained in full. "Everything you need's inside," he said. "Generator's full. My number's on the fridge. I'm a quarter mile up the main road if anything moves." "Thank you, Tom," Sophia said. He looked at her. "Nobody should be left in the cold," he said simply, and went back to his truck. Mia was delighted by the cabin, in the way that only children can be delighted by unexpected things. She found a deck of cards and a checkerboard and a shelf of paperback novels and announced that this was actually very cool, and could they stay forever? Sophia played 2 games of checkers with her, and lost the first on purpose, and the second for real, which Mia noticed and pointed out with some satisfaction. Ethan sat by the window with his phone and waited. At 6:17, Laura called. "Filed," she said. "DA's office has it. Asset freeze petition is with the judge. I expect a ruling by morning." A pause. "Ethan, the Denver contact I called, she's been looking at Ryan Collins for 8 months." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "What?" "A woman in Denver. A former business partner. Collins ran the same playbook on her 3 years ago, not the wheelchair, but the financial control, the isolation, the documentation for incompetency. She got out before it was complete and reported it, but with us, she has documentation of her own. And she has been waiting for someone else to come forward. 2 women, same man, same blueprint." "Does Sophia know?" he asked. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." A pause. "This changes the scope of the case significantly. If Angela will testify alongside Sophia, we're not looking at one incident of fraud. We're looking at a pattern, and patterns are what prosecutors need." Ethan stood up and walked to the far end of the cabin. He kept his voice low. "How solid is Angela's documentation?" he asked. "Very," Laura said. "She's an attorney, Ethan. She knew exactly what to save and how to save it. She's been ready for this call for 2 years. He closed his eyes for 1 second. He thought about Ryan Collins, who had done this before, who had found a woman and studied her and built the walls around her slowly enough that she didn't feel them closing in, who had failed once and learned from the failure and come back with a better version of the same plan, who had sat across from Sophia in a hospital room and held her hand and made promises in the specific, careful language of a man who had already calculated the exit. "Tell her," Ethan said. "Tell Sophia tonight." He walked back across the cabin. Sophia was watching him. She had seen his face change while he was on the phone, and she had the look of someone who had already decided to be ready for whatever it was. He sat down across from her and held out the phone. "Laura needs to tell you something," he said. Sophia took the phone. She listened for 3 minutes without speaking. Her face did not break. Her hands did not shake. She listened the way she did everything, with the precise, complete attention of someone who understood that information was the only weapon that actually mattered. When she lowered the phone, she said, "He did this before." "Yes," Ethan said. "He practiced on someone else first." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "And she's willing to stand up." "She's been ready for 2 years." Sophia handed the phone back. She looked at the wall for a moment, then at the checkerboard where Mia had already set up a new game and was waiting with the patient hopefulness of a child who has decided the adults are done with the serious part. One more game, Mia asked. Sophia looked at her. One more game, she said. She moved her first piece, and Ethan watched her and thought about the specific courage it took to sit at a checkerboard with an 8-year-old and be completely present when the rest of your life was assembling itself into something enormous and terrifying in the next room. To give Mia the game she'd asked for, because the game was what Mia needed, and Sophia Bennett had never been the kind of person who confused her own fear with an excuse to fail someone else. He thought about Ryan Collins, who believed he had left a fragile woman in the cold. He had left the wrong woman in the cold. He had left a woman who had spent 7 months learning how to exist in a world that kept telling her she was less than she was and had never once agreed. Who had taken a photograph with a trembling hand 3 weeks before everything fell apart because some deep, unclosable part of her refused to be erased. Who had walked into Laura Mitchell's office and corrected a date in a legal document and asked the right questions and signed her name with the steady hand of someone who was not requesting justice. She was demanding it. At 9:43 that night, Mia fell asleep on the couch with a paperback novel across her chest. Ethan carried her to the back bedroom and pulled the blanket over her and stood in the doorway for a moment, in the way he always did, checking that she was real, that she was there, that the particular miracle of her had not somehow been retracted. I went back to the main room. Sophia was still at the table, his laptop open in front of her, her own notepad covered in small, neat handwriting beside it. "Working," he said. "I found the original formation documents for Bennett Holdings, LLC, she said without looking up. He filed them in Delaware, standard shell structure, but the registered agent is David Harmon." She looked up. "That's the David from the phone call Marcus overheard. David Harmon is a junior attorney at Hargrove and Associates. He's been Ryan's fixer on the financial side." Ethan sat down. "You found this just now. Publicly available records," she said. "Delaware Corporate Database. It took me 20 minutes. She turned the laptop toward him. "Ryan used my name misspelled for the LLC. He used his attorney's name as the registered agent, and he filed it 6 weeks ago, which means he started this before he even decided to use the bus stop." She paused. "He had a timeline. He was behind schedule." "Behind schedule," Ethan repeated. "Something spooked him," she said. "Something made him move faster than he planned. He wasn't ready. He made mistakes the spelling using Harmon directly, instead of a third party calling you tonight when he should have waited." She looked at Ethan. "A careful man doesn't make those calls. A careful man waits." He panicked. "What would have spooked him?" Ethan said. She folded her hands. "Marcus tried to report him," she said. 2 weeks ago, Ryan found out, probably through Crane, that someone had gone to the police. He didn't know what Marcus had heard, but he knew someone had tried to report something." She met Ethan's eyes. "He thought his window was closing, so he moved. He drove me to that bus stop because he was out of time, not because he was ready." The cabin was very quiet. Outside, the January night pressed against the windows, and the nearest lights were Tom Briggs's place a quarter-mile up the road, and the nearest threat was Ryan Collins, sitting somewhere in a warm house recalculating without knowing what he didn't know. He didn't know about Angela Reyes. He didn't know about Janet Kowalski's statement. He didn't know that Marcus had written everything down. I didn't know that in Delaware's publicly available corporate database, the mistake he'd made in a hurry 6 weeks ago was sitting there in plain text, waiting for a woman with 20 minutes and an internet connection. He didn't know that Laura Mitchell's complaint was already in the DA's hands. And he didn't know, would never have guessed, would never have put it in his calculations, that a single father with bad coffee and a truck that ran on stubbornness had stopped at a broken bus shelter on a county road and seen something worth stopping for. Ethan looked at Sophia across the table. "Send all of that to Laura," he said. "Tonight." "Already composing the email," she said. He stood up and went to make coffee. She called after him. "It's going to be terrible." "It always is," he said. And somewhere in the specific quiet of that, in the bad coffee and the Delaware database, and the child asleep in the back room, and the 48 hours that were running down towards something none of them could fully see, yet something settled in Ethan Parker's chest. Not certainty. He'd been a firefighter long enough to know that certainty was a luxury you didn't get before the moment of truth. But something close to it, Something that felt, if he was being exact about it, like the particular calm of a man who has made his decision and is done second-guessing it. Ryan Collins had left a woman in the cold because he thought no one was watching. Someone was watching, and tomorrow a lot more people would be. The asset freeze order came through at 7:14 the next morning. Laura Mitchell called, while Ethan was still making coffee, and Sophia was at the table with his laptop, having apparently not slept more than 3 hours. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was pulled back with a pen she'd borrowed from the notepad and forgotten about, and she looked more alert than anyone had a right to look at 7 in the morning after everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. Ethan put the phone on speaker without being asked. Judge Harlan signed it 40 minutes ago, Laura said. All assets transferred from Sophia's accounts or her firm in the last 90 days are frozen pending investigation. That includes Bennett Holdings, LLC, all 11 licensing contracts Ryan attempted to transfer, and 3 joint accounts he opened in both their names that Sophia never knew existed. Sophia's hand stopped moving on the keyboard. 3 joint accounts, she said. Opened 8 months ago, Laura said. 1 week after your accident. He'd been depositing licensing income into them for 7 months. The total sitting in those accounts right now is $412,000. The number landed in the room like something physical. Ethan set his coffee down. Sophia stared at the phone for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "He started the week I was in the hospital." "Yes," Laura said. "I was in surgery," Sophia said. "I was in a medically induced coma for 4 days after the crash, and he was opening bank accounts." Nobody said anything for a moment. "There's more," Laura said. "The DA reviewed the complaint last night. Given the previous incident with Angela Reyes and the new documentation, they're moving forward. They want to meet with Sophia this morning. Both witnesses, Angela and Marcus, have already been contacted. Angela is driving up from Denver." A pause. "Ryan Collins doesn't know any of this yet. His attorney will be notified when the DA's office is ready, not before." Ethan looked at Sophia. She was looking at the table. Her jaw was set. Something was moving through her that he'd learned in 3 days to recognize the specific internal shift of a woman who had been absorbing blow after blow and had decided finally and completely that she was done absorbing and ready to hit back. "What time?" she said. 10 o'clock, Laura said. DA's office in Glenwood Springs. "We'll be there at 9:45, Sophia said. She closed the laptop and looked at Ethan. "Wake Mia up," she said. "We need to move." He woke Mia at 7:30. She came out of the back bedroom with her hair sideways and her owl pajamas rumpled, and immediately looked at Sophia and said, "Is it the good kind of morning or the serious kind?" "Serious kind," Sophia said, "but moving toward good." Mia nodded. "I'll get dressed fast." She was dressed in 4 minutes, which was a personal record. Tom Briggs met them at the cabin door with a thermos of coffee and a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches from the gas station down the highway, and he pressed both into Ethan's hands and said, "Drive careful. Roads are still icy from the storm." Then he looked at Sophia and added, "Give 'em hell." Sophia looked at him. "That's the plan," she said. They were on the road by 8:10. Mia ate her sandwich in the back seat and looked out the window at the snow-covered fields and said, "Dad, when this is all over, can Sophia stay with us for real?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Sophia turned slightly in the passenger seat. "What do you mean by for real?" she said. "Like not just because of the emergency," Mia said. "Like because we want her to." The truck was quiet for a moment. "Let's get through today first," Ethan said. Mia considered this. "That means maybe," she announced, and went back to her sandwich. Sophia looked out this passenger window. Ethan could see her reflection in the glass, the small private expression that crossed her face and was gone before it was quite a smile. They arrived at the DA's office at 9:43. Laura was already there, standing in the lobby with a woman Ethan didn't know. Angela Reyes, he realized. She was 40, dark-haired, compact, with the precise posture of someone who had been preparing for a specific moment for a long time and had decided the moment was now. She was carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had been packed and ready for weeks. She saw Sophia come through the door, and something shifted in her face. Something that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite recognition, but was both underneath. She walked across the lobby and said, "You're Sophia." "Yes," Sophia said. "He told you you were fragile," Angela said. Not a question. Sophia looked at her steadily. "Every week for 5 months." Angela nodded once. "Me too." She held out her hand. "We're going to end this today." Sophia shook it. "Yes," she said. "We are." The meeting with the DA lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. Ethan stayed in the lobby with Mia, who did homework on a notepad she'd brought from the cabin, and periodically asked him to quiz her on the water cycle. He quizzed her. He drank 2 cups of coffee from a machine in the hallway that made Laura's office coffee look sophisticated. He sat in a plastic chair in a county building and thought about a man in a warm house who had no idea what was walking toward him. At 11:58, the door to the conference room opened. Sophia came out first. She came out with her back straight and her hands in her lap and her eyes forward, and she moved through the door with the deliberate calm of someone who has walked through the hardest part of something and come out the other side of it, still recognizable. Laura was 2 steps behind her. She looked at Ethan and gave a single nod. He let out a breath. Angela Reyes came out last, and she was already on her phone quietly and precisely updating someone her attorney Ethan guessed with the short-numbered summary of a woman who had been organizing this case in her head for 2 years and could recite it in her sleep. Mia looked up from her homework and saw Sophia's face and said, "Good serious or bad serious?" Sophia stopped in front of her. "Good serious," she said. Mia reached up and took Sophia's hand and held it for a moment without saying anything else. And Sophia looked down at this child who had taken her in with the uncomplicated generosity of someone too young to have learned, yet how to talk herself out of kindness, and she held on. In the truck on the way back, Laura's voice came through the phone on the dash. "The DA is issuing a warrant for Ryan's arrest by end of business today. Financial fraud, elder and disability financial abuse statute, and criminal abandonment. Hargrove and Associates has already been notified that David Harmon is under investigation as a co-conspirator." A pause. "And Dennis Crane, the officer from the department, has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs review." Ethan drove and listened and said nothing. "Sophia," Laura said. "Ryan's attorney called the DA's office 20 minutes ago. Ryan knows." Sophia's hands were in her lap. "What did he say?" "His attorney said he was prepared to make a full statement clearing up what he described as a misunderstanding," Laura said. "He wants a meeting." "He's scared," Sophia said. "He's very scared," Laura confirmed. "He thought he was the only one who'd been building a case." A pause. "He was wrong." They got back to Tom's cabin at 1:30 in the afternoon. Tom was on his porch and took one look at their faces and said, "Somebody's buying dinner tonight," and went inside to start making it, because that was what Tom Briggs did when things turned in the right direction. He cooked because feeding people was the most direct form of celebration he knew. Mia asked if she could help, and Tom handed her a wooden spoon, and she was occupied for the next hour, which gave Ethan and Sophia 40 minutes of quiet in the main room of the cabin, while Tom narrated a beef stew recipe to an 8-year-old in the kitchen. Sophia sat by the window with his phone in her hand. She'd asked to use it to call her parents. He'd said, of course, and given her the room and gone to split some wood outside. Not because wood needed splitting, but because she needed 15 minutes of privacy, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. When he came back in, she was holding the phone in her lap with the call ended. Her eyes were a little red around the edges. Not from crying exactly, from the particular exhaustion of explaining something terrible to people who loved you and watching them absorb it in real time. "How'd they take it?" he asked. "My mother cried," she said. "My father said he was getting on a plane." She paused. "I told him to wait 2 days, that it was being handled and I was safe." She looked at Ethan. "He asked who I was with." Ethan sat down. "What did you say?" "I said I was with a man named Ethan Parker, who found me at a bus stop in a blizzard and brought me home and gave me bad coffee and hasn't once made me feel like a burden." She looked at him steadily. "He asked if he should be worried about you." Ethan's mouth almost moved. "What did you say?" "I said no," she said. I said you were the least worrying person I'd met in a long time. A pause. He said that was either very good or very boring. Both probably, Ethan said. She looked at her hands. Then she said, my mother asked if I was happy. He waited. I didn't know how to answer that, she said. I haven't thought about happy in a long time. Ryan made happy feel like something I'd have to earn back gradually after I proved I could manage. After I proved I was improving enough, functioning enough, contributing enough. She looked at the window. I don't know when I stopped thinking about it as something I was allowed to just be, without the conditions. Ethan sat with that for a moment. What did you tell her? He asked. I told her I was getting there, Sophia said. She looked at him. Which is the truest thing I've said in months. He held her gaze for a moment. Then from the kitchen, Mia's voice. Dad, Tom says I can stir, but I need you to check if I'm doing it right. Ethan stood up. Duty calls, he said. Sophia's mouth moved. It was the closest thing to a full, unguarded smile he'd seen from her. Go, she said. He went. The afternoon settled into something almost ordinary. Tom's stew. Mia's running commentary on the stirring technique. Sophia at the table with the laptop working through public records with the focused intensity of someone who had discovered that information was both weapon and medicine. Twice she called out a question to the kitchen, and Ethan answered from the stove without thinking about it. And the third time it happened, Tom Briggs looked at him sideways with an expression that required no translation, and Ethan looked back at the stew and said nothing. At 4:47, Laura Mitchell called. Ethan answered, and the first thing she said was, he ran. The kitchen went quiet. What? Ethan said. Ryan Collins left his house at approximately 2:30 this afternoon with 2 suitcases. His attorney tried to reach him for the statement meeting, and he wasn't answering. A neighbor saw him loading his car. Laura's voice was controlled but moving fast. The warrant is active. I've notified state police and the DA has flagged his passport. Where's he going? Ethan said. We don't know yet. But he took 2 suitcases, not one, and he didn't tell his attorney where he was going, which means this wasn't a planned exit. He panicked. A pause. Ethan, I need to know, does Sophia have any information about properties or accounts? Ryan might have outside Colorado. Anything he mentioned in passing, any trip he took that seemed off. Ethan was already crossing to the main room. He put the phone on speaker and held it out. Sophia heard the question before he could repeat it. She had been listening from the doorway. He went to Phoenix 4 times last year, she said immediately. He said it was for investment property viewings. He never asked me to come. He paid for those trips in cash, I noticed, because he always used cards for everything else. She moved to the table and opened the laptop. He has a college roommate in Scottsdale, Daniel Fitch. Ryan mentioned him 3 times, but I've never met him. He was always vague about what Fitch did for work. Daniel Fitch, Scottsdale, Arizona, Laura said. I'm running it now. Sophia was already typing. I'm in the Arizona Business Registry, she said. Daniel Fitch. She stopped. What? Ethan said. She turned the laptop toward him. Daniel Fitch is the registered agent for 4 LLCs incorporated in Arizona in the last 18 months. She scrolled. One of them is called Copper Ridge Properties. She looked up. 3 months ago, Ryan told me he'd been offered an investment opportunity in Arizona real estate. He said it was nothing significant. He said he'd pass. She looked at the screen. He didn't pass. Laura made a sharp sound. Sophia, email me that page right now. Sophia was already composing. If he has money in Arizona accounts, Laura said, and a contact there who's been his accomplice on the LLC structure, that's where he's heading. I'm calling Arizona State Police and the FBI Financial Crimes Tip Line. A pause. The moment he crosses state lines with fraudulently obtained assets, this becomes federal. Ethan stood in the middle of Tom Briggs's cabin, with the January afternoon going blue and cold outside the windows, and he thought about Ryan Collins in a car on a highway somewhere, 2 suitcases in the back, calculating, still believing that the calculus was his to control, that he could move fast enough to stay ahead of everything he'd set in motion. He thought about what Sophia had said the night before. He was behind schedule. He panicked. Panicked men make mistakes, and panicked men, running from a federal fraud investigation with assets frozen in 3 states, didn't usually run toward their known associates in Arizona, unless they were also running out of options. "Laura," Ethan said. "He's not going to Fitch." A pause. "Why?" "Because Fitch is in the registry," he said. "Ryan's smart enough to know that if we found Bennett Holdings, we can find Copper Ridge. He wouldn't go to a name we can already pull." He thought about the 11 seconds of that phone call, the smoothness, the composure. He has somewhere else, somewhere clean, somewhere nobody knows about. Laura was quiet for 3 seconds. "You think there's another account?" "I think there's another name," he said. He looked at Sophia. "Is there anyone in his life you never met? Someone he mentioned once and never again? Someone he seemed to not want you to ask about?" Sophia was very still. "His brother," she said. Ethan frowned. "He has a brother. Had. He told me his brother died. Overdosed 12 years ago. He said it when we first started dating. He brought it up once very briefly, and he said it was something he didn't like to talk about, and I respected that." She paused. "His name was Patrick. Patrick Collins." She looked at Ethan with the expression of someone arriving at a thought they don't want to complete. "Ryan said he was estranged, that they hadn't spoken before Patrick died." "What if Patrick didn't die?" Ethan said. The silence that followed was a specific, dense kind of silence. Laura's voice, when it came, was careful. "Running Patrick Collins, Colorado, Arizona, surrounding states." The sound of typing. 10 seconds. 15. Then, "There's no death certificate on record in Colorado for a Patrick James Collins, not in the last 20 years. The cabin was completely still. Tom Briggs appeared in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over his shoulder and looked at the room and silently went back into the kitchen. "He's alive," Sophia said. It wasn't a question. "Patrick Collins, 41 years old, currently registered in Flagstaff, Arizona," Laura said. "Owner of a property registered to," a pause, "P.J. Collins Holdings, Incorporated 11 months ago." 11 months ago. 3 months before Ryan started managing Sophia's accounts. The shape of it was complete now, fully assembled. Not the rushed, panicked structure of a man improvising, but the long, patient architecture of a man who had been planning this for almost a year. Who had a brother the world thought was dead. Who had a clean name with no connection to Ryan Collins, to Hargrove and Associates, to Bennett Holdings, to any of it. A name that Sophia, the one person who might have discovered it, had been told never to ask about. "I was always going to disappear," Sophia said quietly. "That was always the end of the plan. Not just take the money and stay. Take the money and vanish. Leave behind a story about a disabled woman who was mentally compromised and couldn't manage her own affairs, and walk away to a new life with a brother nobody knew about." Ethan looked at her. She looked back at him with the absolute clear-eyed calm of someone who has just seen the full picture of a betrayal that was larger than she'd imagined, and has decided that its size does not change what she intends to do about it. "He's driving to Flagstaff," she said. "Already on the phone to Arizona," Laura said. "Patrick Collins's address is being flagged now. If Ryan shows up there..." "He won't go to the address," Sophia said. "He's smarter than that. He'll call Patrick from the road and they'll arrange a meeting point." She paused. "Does Patrick have a phone registered in Colorado?" The sound of typing. "Yes," Laura said. "Flagstaff number but Colorado billing address." "Then you can track the call," Sophia said. "Already making that request," Laura said. "I need a court order for the records, but given the active warrant, 20 minutes, maybe less." A pause. "Sophia, you're very good at this." "I designed buildings," Sophia said. "You have to understand the whole structure before you can find where it's weak." She looked at Ethan. He looked at her. And in the 36 hours since he'd found her at a bus stop in a blizzard, soaked and still and waiting with the patience of someone who had already decided that what came next was not going to beat her, he had watched her rebuild herself, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Not because he'd given her safety, though he had. Not because Laura had given her legal standing, though she had. But because Mia had asked her if she could still dream, and she had said yes and meant it, and everything that had happened since had been a direct consequence of that answer. Tom appeared again in the doorway. "Stew's ready," he said. "Whatever's happening, it can happen after food." Mia's voice from the kitchen. "Tom says food first. It's a rule." Ethan looked at Sophia. 5 minutes, she said to him and to Laura both. 5 minutes, Laura agreed. "I'll call you when I have the court order." They ate Tom's stew at the cabin table, all 4 of them, because Tom set a bowl for himself without being asked, and sat down at the end of the table with the comfortable ease of a man who understood that being present was sometimes the most useful thing you could do. Mia told Tom about the Caldwell Community Center on page 214, and Tom said he'd driven past it once and always wondered who designed it. Sophia said she had, and Tom nodded with the specific approval of a man who respected work done well, and said, "The windows are something else." Sophia smiled, a real one, full unhurried. "That's what Mia said," she told him. Tom looked at Mia. "Smart kid." "I know," Mia said. At 6:23, Laura called back. "We have the cell records," she said. Ryan called Patrick Collins at 3:17 this afternoon, 8-minute call. 2 hours later, Patrick Collins's phone pinged a tower in Winslow, Arizona, that's I-40 heading west toward Flagstaff. A pause. Arizona State Police have units at Patrick's registered address and at the 3 most likely meeting points on that route. Ryan's car was picked up on an I-70 traffic camera in Grand Junction at 4:50. Another pause. "He's about 4 hours from Flagstaff." "Will they get there in time?" Ethan asked. "They're already there," Laura said. "We just needed him to keep driving." The silence that followed was different from all the other silences of the last 2 days. It was the silence of a clock running down toward zero. Of something that had been in motion for almost a year. Planned, constructed, refined, and now moving toward its inevitable end. Not because Ryan Collins had made one catastrophic mistake, but because he had made 100 careful ones, and all of them were now assembled in a folder on a DA's desk in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Mia looked at the phone on the table, and then at her dad. "Is it almost over?" she asked. Ethan looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at the phone. "Almost," she said. At 9:47 that night, Laura called for the last time. Ethan answered. He was sitting in the main room with the wood stove going, and Mia asleep in the back with her book, and Tom's truck gone from the property, because Tom had gone home at 8, and said, "Call me if you need anything," and shaken Ethan's hand one more time at the door. Sophia was beside him on the couch. Not close, one cushion between them, but present. Solid. The particular presence of someone who had decided to stay in a room instead of leaving it. He put the phone on speaker. "They got him," Laura said. "Winslow, Arizona. He'd stopped at a diner to meet Patrick. Arizona State Police made the arrest at 9:22. Patrick Collins is in custody as well." A pause. "Ryan Collins is under federal arrest for wire fraud, financial, elder and disability abuse, and criminal conspiracy. His attorney is already on a plane." Ethan let out a breath that had been in his chest for 2 days. He looked at Sophia. She was looking at the wood stove. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face was doing something complicated and quiet. Not joy, exactly. Not the uncomplicated relief he might have expected. Something more nuanced. The specific expression of someone who has been vindicated and discovered that vindication, while necessary, does not undo anything that was done. Does not give back the 7 months. Does not change the fact that the person you were going to marry was standing next to you, planning your erasure, while you were learning how to navigate the world in a different body than the one you'd had before. It doesn't undo any of it. It just means you can stop fighting on that particular front and start the longer work. "Sophia," Laura said, "I need to say something to you." "Okay," Sophia said. "I've worked 17 cases like this," Laura said. "In every single one there is a moment when the victim, and I know you hate that word, bear with me, there is a moment when the person being harmed makes a decision. To stay quiet, or to be loud. To believe what they're being told about themselves, or to refuse it." A pause. "You refused it from a bus stop in a blizzard with no phone and no money and nowhere to go. That's not something I see very often. I want you to know that." Sophia said nothing for a moment. I had help, she said finally. You did, Laura said. Good help makes a difference, but the refusing that was yours. After Laura hung up, the cabin was quiet for a long time. The wood stove made its small sounds. Outside, the Colorado night was clear and enormous and full of stars, in the way it only gets in winter, when the cold cleans the air down to nothing and everything above you is visible and close and relentless in its beauty. Ethan looked at the fire. Sophia said, "Thank you." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "That's why I'm saying it." She looked at him. "You stopped. When everyone else drove past and people drove past Ethan, I watched 2 sets of headlights go by and neither one slowed down. You stopped. And you didn't make it complicated. You didn't ask me to explain myself or prove myself or convince you. You just stopped." She held his gaze. "That's not nothing. That's not a small thing. I need you to know that." He looked at her for a long moment. "My daughter would have wanted me to stop," he said. "Your daughter," Sophia said, "is the best person I've met in a very long time, including adults." "She'll be pleased to hear that," he said. "She's been collecting evidence that she's smarter than me since age 6. Sophia's mouth moved. "She's right," she said. He didn't argue. The fire crackled. The stars stayed where they were, indifferent and permanent and very bright. And 2 people who had each separately lived through the particular education of learning that the worst thing that happens to you is not the final thing about you. Sat in a cabin in January and let the quiet be enough. In a diner in Winslow, Arizona, Ryan Collins was in the back of a police cruiser in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. A folder on a DA's desk contained 47 pages of documentation assembled in 36 hours by a woman he had believed was too fragile to fight back. In a back bedroom of a hunter's cabin 12 miles outside Willow Creek, an 8-year-old slept with a paperback on her chest and a sticky note on page 214 of a book about buildings and the people who made them possible. And the woman who had designed those windows, who had almost given up on them 3 times and had not sat in the firelight and breathed. In, out, still here, still whole, still after everything exactly who she had always been. 3 days after Ryan Collins was arrested in a diner in Winslow, Arizona, Sophia Bennett sat in Ethan Parker's kitchen and cried for the first time. Not the controlled 30 seconds in the truck. Not the red-rimmed eyes after the call with her parents. This was different. The full, ugly, unmanaged kind of crying that happens when the emergency is finally over and your body realizes it has been running on adrenaline and sheer refusal for so long that it has forgotten what normal feels like, and normal when it arrives is so unfamiliar it breaks you open. Ethan was at the counter making breakfast. He heard it start, a small sound, just one that she tried to stop, and he turned the burner down, and he did not say anything. He did not cross the room. He filled a glass of water and set it on the table in front of her, and went back to the eggs and let her cry without making it something she had to manage for his comfort. She cried for 4 minutes. Then she picked up the water and drank half of it and set it down and said, "I don't know why I'm crying now. It's over." "Because it's over," he said. "That's exactly why." She looked at the table. "I feel stupid." "You spent 4 days being the most composed person in every room," he said. "You're allowed 4 minutes." She looked at the eggs he was scrambling. "You burn them sometimes," she said. "Not today," he said. Something crossed her face. "Mia told me that." "Mia tells everyone everything," he said. "Fair warning if you're planning to keep any secrets." She laughed. Just briefly, just once, the surprised kind that comes out before you've decided to let it. And then she pressed her hand to her mouth like she was startled by the sound of it. He put the eggs on the table and sat down across from her. "What happens now?" he said. She took a breath. "Catherine is filing to dissolve Bennett Holdings today. The frozen accounts go into escrow pending the criminal case. The DA says the licensing contracts never legally transferred. Ryan's signature was forged on the authorization documents, so my firm retains all 17. She paused. "Angela Reyes's attorney is filing a parallel civil suit. Between the 2 of us, the DA's office believes the criminal case is airtight." "And the condo," Ethan said. "Still in my name." Ryan was paying the mortgage from our joint account, the one I didn't know existed, so technically he's been making my mortgage payments with my own money for 7 months. She paused. Which is almost funny if you look at it from a certain angle. Almost, he said. Catherine says I can move back in whenever I'm ready. She looked at the eggs. I don't know when that is. He said nothing. He waited. Ryan was in every room of that place, she said. He picked the furniture. He oversaw the accessibility modifications. He made it feel like something he'd given me even though it was mine before he arrived. She looked up. I don't know if I can walk back in there, wheel back in there and not see all of that. You don't have to decide today, Ethan said. I know, she said. That's what I keep telling myself. She picked up her fork. I keep making lists of things I don't have to decide today. The list is getting very long. That's allowed, he said. The list can be as long as it needs to be. She ate. He ate. Through the ceiling came the familiar sound of Mia getting up, drawer feet. The particular thump of a stuffed animal being knocked off the bed and not retrieved. They had been back at Ethan's house for 2 days, back in the regular rhythm of it, and Sophia had watched those rhythms from the inside and had started almost without deciding to become part of them. She set the table in the morning without being asked. She helped Mia with a school project on Colorado geography that had been due Thursday and had been extended because of a snow day. She sat in the living room in the evening while Ethan read and Mia did her homework, and she worked on her own laptop, slowly, carefully opening files she hadn't opened in 7 months. Design files. At first, she just looked at them. Then she started making small notes in the margins. Then, on the 3rd night, she had pulled up a blank canvas and stared at it for 20 minutes, and Ethan had come to refill his coffee and seen her staring and said nothing, and refilled her coffee too without asking, and she had looked at the blank screen for 5 more minutes and then started drawing. He didn't ask what it was. She didn't say. Mia came downstairs at 7:22 in the owl pajamas she had apparently committed to for the entire winter and looked at the kitchen table and said, "You made eggs. Are they burned?" "Sit down and find out," Ethan said. She sat. She ate. "Not burned," she announced. Then to Sophia, "Did you sleep okay? You were up late. I heard the keyboard." "I was working," Sophia said. Mia's eyes went wide. "On a building." "On an idea," Sophia said. "It's not a building yet." "Can I see?" Sophia looked at her for a moment. "When it's further along," she said. "I'll show you first." Mia accepted this with the gravity of someone who had been given a real promise and knew the difference. "Okay," she said, and finished her eggs. The call from Sophia's father came at 9 a.m. Robert Bennett was 64 years old, a retired civil engineer from Phoenix, and Sophia had told Ethan in advance that he would call at 9 because her father scheduled everything, including emotional conversations, and that when he called, he would be polite and controlled, and that should not be mistaken for being fine because he was not fine. He was furious in the specific compressed way of men who have been raised to believe that their job is to protect their children and have just discovered that a failure occurred on their watch. Sophia took the call in the guest room with the door closed. Ethan gave her the room and took Mia to school. He was back by 8:50. The door was still closed. He made another pot of coffee and waited. She came out at 9:34. Her eyes were red. Her jaw was set. She had the look of someone who had just spent 30 minutes being simultaneously loved and interrogated. "He's coming Friday," she said. "Okay," Ethan said. "He wants to meet you." Ethan poured her coffee. "Also okay." She looked at him. "He's going to have questions." "He's your father," Ethan said. "He can ask whatever he wants." She took the mug. "He asked me the same thing Mia asked, whether I was happy." She looked at the coffee. "I told him the same thing I told my mother, that I was getting there." She paused. "He said that wasn't an answer." "What did you say?" "I said it was the most honest one I had." She looked up. "He said, and this is my father, who has said approximately 9 emotional things in my entire life," he said. "Sophia, you survived the accident, and you survived that man, and you are still standing. And if you can find someone worth standing next to, then stand next to them." She stopped. And then he coughed and said the flight was getting expensive and he had to go. Ethan looked at his coffee. "Smart man," he said. "Structural engineer," she said. "They know where the load goes." 3 days later, Robert Bennett arrived on a Friday afternoon, driving a rental car, with the precision of a man who had mapped the route the night before. He was tall, gray-haired, with Sophia's same dark eyes and the same habit of looking at a room and taking stock before he spoke. He shook Ethan's hand at the door and looked at him for a moment with the direct assessment of a man who had designed bridges and knew the difference between a structure that would hold and one that looked like it would. "Mr. Parker," he said. "Ethan," he said. Robert Bennett looked at him for one more second. Then he nodded. "Ethan," he said. He sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee. He said it was terrible, and drank 2 cups and watched Sophia move through the kitchen with the attention of a father, cataloging the difference between who his daughter had been 6 months ago and who she was now. He asked her 3 questions about the criminal case and listened to the answers without interrupting. He asked 1 question about the condo. He asked nothing about Ryan Collins beyond what was legally relevant, which told Ethan more about the man's self-discipline than any conversation could. When Mia came home from school, she walked in the door and stopped and looked at Robert Bennett and said, "Are you Sophia's dad?" "I am," he said. "She has your eyebrows," Mia said. Robert Bennett looked at Sophia. "She's right," Sophia said. "She's very direct," he said. "Yes," Sophia said. "That's one of my favorite things about her." Mia put her backpack down and came to the table and sat down and looked at Robert Bennett with the complete unself-conscious attention of a child who has decided someone is interesting. "Do you build things?" she asked. "Sophia builds things." "I built bridges," he said, "for 40 years. Mia thought about this. "That's also really cool," she said. "What's the biggest bridge you built?" he told her. And for 20 minutes, an 8-year-old and a 64-year-old retired engineer talked about load tolerance and suspension cables, and why some bridges sway, and whether that was intentional. And Ethan watched Sophia watch her father and saw something settle in her face. Some weight she'd been carrying about Friday, about this conversation, about what her father would see when he looked at her life now, quietly, completely release. Robert Bennett stayed for dinner. He washed his own dish, which Ethan noticed. He said goodbye to Mia at the door and shook her hand like she was an adult, and she shook back with matching seriousness. He hugged Sophia for a long time at the door without saying anything. Then he looked at Ethan. "Take care of her," he said. "She takes care of herself," Ethan said. Robert Bennett looked at him for a beat. Then something shifted in his face, very small, completely real. "Yes," he said. "She does." He paused. "But take care of her anyway." He drove away in the rental car, and Sophia stood at the door watching the taillights, and Ethan stood 1 step behind her and did not say anything because nothing needed to be said. 2 weeks after Ryan Collins's arrest, Laura Mitchell called with the update Sophia had been waiting for. It was a Tuesday morning. Ethan was at a job site. Sophia was alone in the house, a thing that had happened gradually, naturally, without anyone making a formal arrangement about it. She had stayed. Not in a temporary guest way. In the way that people stay when a place has started to feel like where they belong. She answered on the second ring. "The DA's office confirmed this morning," Laura said. "Ryan Collins is entering a guilty plea. 14 counts: fraud, criminal abandonment, disability, financial abuse, conspiracy." A pause. His attorney negotiated down from the federal wire fraud charge in exchange for the plea. "But Ethan, he's looking at 7 to 12 years. Sophia sat at the kitchen table with the phone in her hand. 7 to 12 years. She had thought she would feel more when this moment came. She had imagined it as a door-closing final loud definitive. But it was quieter than that. It was more like the last piece of a thing that had been assembled over a very long time, finally clicking into place. Not a victory exactly. A completion. "Angela," she said, "the civil suit is still active. Her attorney expects a settlement within 60 days. With the criminal plea as precedent, the civil case is very strong." A pause. "Sophia, He signed a confession as part of the plea agreement. A full statement. It names David Harmon, it names Patrick Collins, and it confirms in his own words that the bus stop was premeditated. Laura's voice was careful. It confirms that he intended you to be found incompetent before anyone realized you were missing. That you were supposed to disappear from your own life slowly enough that nobody questioned it. Sophia looked at the kitchen counter, at the coffee maker, at the junk drawer Ethan still hadn't cleaned out, at the refrigerator where Mia had stuck a drawing of what was labeled in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Our house, with 3 figures in front of it. One tall, one small one, in a wheelchair. All of them with oversized smiling faces and stick arms that seemed to be reaching toward each other. Okay, Sophia said. Okay, Laura said. I mean, thank you for all of it. She paused. Is there anything else I need to do? Your attorney will handle the rest. You may be called to make a victim impact statement at sentencing. That's your choice, you don't have to. I'll do it, Sophia said. No hesitation. I thought you would, Laura said. And there was something in her voice, not quite warmth, because Laura Mitchell did not do warmth in the loose, easy way some people did, but the particular quiet respect of one competent person for another. You should know something, Sophia. In 19 years I have never seen a case turn this fast or this completely. What you did in those 48 hours, the documents, the records, the connections you made. Most people in your situation would have been too scared to think clearly. You weren't scared. I was terrified, Sophia said. Yes, Laura said. And you did it anyway. That's the part that matters. After she hung up, Sophia sat at the table for a while. She sat in the particular quiet of a house that had been a stranger's house 5 weeks ago, and had become without her fully deciding it hers in some way that she didn't have the exact right word for yet. She opened her laptop. The design file was on the screen where she'd left it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up her pen and started working. She worked for 3 hours straight without stopping. When Ethan came home at 2:30, still covered in sawdust from the job site, she looked up and said, "He pled guilty." He stopped in the doorway. 7 to 12, she said. He nodded slowly. How do you feel? He asked. She thought about it. Like I can breathe in a different way than I've been breathing, she said. Like there was something in my chest I didn't know I was holding until it wasn't there anymore. He came to the counter and poured himself coffee. He looked at it. This is fresh, he said with mild surprise. I made it, she said. He drank it. It's good. Yes, she said. I know. He looked over her shoulder at the laptop. What are you working on? She turned the screen toward him. He looked at it. It was a building, not a large one. Low open with a wide accessible entrance and a roof that curved in a way that suggested shelter rather than enclosure. Large windows on the south face. A covered outdoor section connected to the main structure by a wide, smooth path. Simple and functional, and unmistakably designed by someone who understood that a building could make a person feel either more or less than they were. What is it? He said. The bus shelter on County Road 7, she said. Except not a shelter. Something bigger. A community space. Accessible. Heated. She paused. Somewhere that anyone in a hard situation could come and be warm and be seen. She looked at the screen. I want to donate the design to the county. I want to pitch it to the county commissioner's office next week. Ethan looked at the drawing for a long time. The windows, he said. South-facing, she said. They'll get light most of the day. Same coefficient argument as the Caldwell Center. She looked at him. You remembered that? Mia gave me a full recap, he said. Twice. She turned back to the screen. Similar principle. The light should feel deliberate, not accidental. She traced a line on the screen with one finger. Nobody should sit in a dark shelter and feel like the world has forgotten about them. Even the light should say that someone thought about you when they built this. Ethan set his coffee down. He said, It's extraordinary, Sophia. She looked at the screen. It's a beginning, she said. The county commissioner's office scheduled a meeting for the following Thursday. Sophia prepared her presentation with the same precision she'd brought to every other task in the last 5 weeks, thorough, documented, specific. She knew her budget estimates to the dollar. She knew the site dimensions from the county GIS database. She had 3 comparable projects with completion timelines and cost analyses attached. Ethan drove her to the meeting and waited in the lobby. She was in there for 45 minutes. She came out with a signed letter of intent and a March groundbreaking date. She didn't say anything until they were in the truck and he'd pulled out of the parking lot. Then she said, "They said yes." "I know," he said. "You know." "I looked at the presentation," he said. "You were always going to get a yes." She looked out the window. "The commissioner asked me why I wanted to build it there," she said. "On that specific road." "What did you say?" "I said someone stopped for me there," she said, "and that stopping for people matters, and that some things should be built to make stopping easier." She paused. She cried a little. "I didn't expect that." "People surprise you," Ethan said. "Yes," she said. "They do." The groundbreaking was on a Saturday in March when the snow had pulled back from the fields and the first thin green was showing along the fence lines, and the air had that specific quality it only has in early Colorado spring. Cold still, but with something underneath it that was moving toward warmth, like a decision that had already been made. Marcus came from Denver. He stood beside Sophia with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at the site and said, "You're going to put windows on the south side, aren't you?" "Obviously," she said. He shook his head. "You always do the windows." Angela Reyes drove up from Denver with her attorney and brought coffee for everyone and shook Sophia's hand and held it for a moment and said quietly, "Thank you for being the one who finally made it stick." Sophia said, "Thank you for waiting." Angela said, "I would have waited longer." And that was the whole of it, and it was enough. Janet Kowalski came with her husband and stood at the back and waved when Sophia caught her eye. Laura Mitchell was there in civilian clothes, jeans, a county jacket, no recorder, standing slightly apart, the way she always did, watching the perimeter out of professional habit. Tom Briggs came in his truck and parked at the edge and got out and stood with his arms folded and nodded at Ethan across the crowd with the contained satisfaction of a man who knew he'd done the right thing and didn't need to talk about it. Robert Bennett flew in from Phoenix. He stood next to Ethan during the ceremony and did not say much. At one point, watching Sophia at the podium, composed direct speaking about what this building was meant to do and for whom and why that mattered. He said quietly to no one in particular. She used to design bridges when she was 7, with popsicle sticks. She'd test the load tolerance with her mother's books. Ethan looked at him. She never told you that, Robert said. No, Ethan said. She doesn't talk about who she was before the accident, Robert said. But I want you to know she was exactly this person, before. The accident didn't make her this way. He paused. It just proved it. Ethan looked back at Sophia. She was standing at the edge of the cleared site, talking to the county engineer, pointing at her drawings with the particular energy of a person who is fully alive in the thing they are doing. Mia was beside her holding the rolled-up plans like she'd been assigned an official job, which she probably had. I know, Ethan said. I could tell from the bus stop. Robert looked at him. She wasn't waiting to be rescued, Ethan said. She was waiting for someone to get out of the way. Robert Bennett was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. That's exactly right. He looked at his daughter. Don't get in her way. I'm trying not to, Ethan said. Robert nodded once firmly with the decisive closure of a structural engineer who has assessed a joint and found it sound. Good, he said. And that was that, after the ceremony. After most people had drifted away with their coffee cups and their good feelings and their specific personal reasons for being glad this thing was happening. Sophia and Ethan and Mia stood at the edge of the site in the March afternoon. Mia was looking at the stakes and the string lines that marked where the walls would be. When will it be done? She asked. Late summer, Sophia said. If the weather cooperates. Can I come to the opening? You're giving a speech at the opening, Sophia said. Mia turned. I am. You're the one who asked me if I could still dream, Sophia said. That question matters. You should say it somewhere that people can hear it. Mia looked at her for a moment with the serious, measuring expression she got when something was important. Okay, she said, but I'm going to practice a lot. I'll help you, Sophia said. Mia nodded. Then she looked at the string lines again. It's going to be really good, she said. I can tell. And she walked off toward Tom's truck because Tom had promised hot chocolate from the gas station on the way home, and she had not forgotten. Ethan and Sophia stood in the quiet. The sight was just stakes and string right now. It was nothing yet. It was the idea of something, the place where something would be marked out in the mud and the early spring grass. Are you okay? Ethan said. She considered the question with the same seriousness she brought to everything. I had a nightmare 2 nights ago, she said. I was back at the bus stop. It was dark and the rain was coming down, and I kept hearing a car engine and looking up, and it was never you. It was always just the sound and then silence. She paused. I woke up, and it took me a minute to know where I was. He waited. And then I heard Mia's feet on the floor above me, she said. That specific shuffle she does when she's half asleep getting up for water. And I knew exactly where I was. She looked at the string lines. I knew I was home. The word landed between them, quiet and enormous. She hadn't said it casually. She knew what she'd said. She looked at him. He looked at her. I have something to tell you, he said. Okay, she said. I've been thinking about Claire a lot lately, he said. That's not what this is. That's just the honest starting place. He paused. After she died, I made a decision that I wasn't going to let anything matter too much. Because if something matters too much and then it's gone, the math is unbearable. I'd already done the math once. He looked at the site. And then you were at a bus stop in a blizzard, and I stopped because I thought of Mia, and I told myself that was the whole reason. That it was just a practical decision. That I was just being decent, Sophia said. Yeah, he said. That's what I told myself. And, she said. He looked at her. And that was true, he said. At first. He paused. And then it was something else. And I didn't know how to say that without making it complicated in a way that wasn't fair to you given everything you were going through. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Ethan, she said. I spent 7 months being told what I was and wasn't capable of. What I did and didn't understand. What I should and shouldn't want. She looked at him directly. Don't decide for me what's fair. He held her gaze. You're right, he said. I know, she said. Then more quietly, I knew at the breakfast table, when you went back to the eggs instead of looking at me while I cried. I knew you understood something that most people don't, that being seen doesn't mean being watched, that giving someone space is also a form of care. She paused. Ryan watched me constantly. He called it love. You looked away on purpose. That's completely different. He said nothing. She said, I'm not in a hurry. Neither am I, he said. I have a building to construct, she said, and a victim impact statement to write, and apparently a speech to coach. She looked at the site. And at some point I have to decide what to do about the condo. One thing at a time, he said. One thing at a time, she agreed. She looked at him. But I want you to know I know what I'm choosing. When I say I'm home, I know what that means. He let that sit. Okay, he said. She nodded once, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was in fact exactly the right amount of everything, not a declaration that closed something off, but an opening a decision. A door that 2 people had agreed to walk through at a pace that honored what it had cost each of them to arrive at it. The building was completed on a Wednesday in late August. The windows were extraordinary. The light came through the south face in the late afternoon, the way Sophia had planned it, deliberate, warm, filling the main room in a way that made the space feel larger and safer than its square footage had any right to produce. The entrance ramp was wide and smooth. The heating was on a timer that turned on at dusk and ran through the night. There was a phone charging station on the east wall and a small resource board with laminated cards listing local services, and there was a bench wide with a low arm on one side and open space on the other that could seat a person in a chair next to a person who wasn't without either one having to adjust. That detail had taken Sophia 3 drafts to get right. She stood inside on the morning of the opening and looked at the windows for a long time. Marcus stood beside her. "South-facing," he said. "Obviously," she said. "You got them exactly right," he said. "I know," she said. Mia's speech was 4 minutes long. She had practiced it 11 times, Sophia had counted, and on the 12th run-through she'd said it was ready and refused to practice again because she said too much. Practice made it sound fake, and she wanted it to sound like she meant it. It sounded like she meant it. She stood at the small podium the county had set up outside, and she said, "When Sophia came to our house, I asked her some questions. I asked her if she could still like music, and if she could still laugh, and if she could still have dreams. She said yes to all of them. I was 8, and I didn't really understand everything that had happened to her. I just wanted to know if she was still herself." She paused. She was. She is. And she built this place so that if anyone ever feels like they've been left somewhere alone in the dark, they can come here, and there will be light, and there will be warmth, and someone will have thought about them before they even arrived. She looked at Sophia. That's what she does. She thinks about people before they get there. That's what the windows are for. There was a long silence. Then applause, and Laura Mitchell looked at the ground for a moment, and Tom Briggs made a sound in his throat that he covered with a cough, and Robert Bennett, who was standing next to Ethan again, said very quietly, "That child is something else." "Yes," Ethan said. "She really is." After the ceremony, after the crowd, and the county commissioner, and the coffee, and the photographs, and Angela Reyes saying goodbye, with a hug that lasted longer than most, and Marcus taking 17 pictures of the windows from different angles, because he said he needed documentation, after all of it had settled into the particular sweetness of an ending, becoming ordinary. Sophia came to where Ethan was standing at the edge of the parking lot. She stopped beside him. They looked at the building. "The windows," he said. "I told you," she said. "You did," he said. She looked at the south face at the afternoon light, doing exactly what she'd calculated it would do, at the warm gold of it falling across the entrance ramp and the bench and the open space she had built, so that people could come in and feel that someone had anticipated them, cared about them, designed a world with them in mind. "A year ago," she said, "I was sitting in a broken bus shelter in a blizzard with no phone and no money and no way forward." "I know," he said. "And now there's this," she said. "There's this," he said. She turned and looked at him with the full, unguarded clarity of a woman who had been through everything. The last year had put her through and had come out of it, not diminished, but more precisely, more completely, herself. "Thank you for stopping," she said. "Thank you for being worth stopping for," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked back at the building. Her building, the one that sat where a broken shelter had once stood, the one with the south-facing windows and the heated interior and the bench that held everyone equally, the one that would stand on that county road for decades and make the world slightly more bearable for people who needed it to be, and she breathed in the August air and let it fill her completely. She had been left in the cold by a man who believed that what she could no longer do defined everything she was. She had been found by a man who stopped his truck in a blizzard because he thought of his daughter and could not drive past. She had fought for herself with every tool she had, her memory, her documentation, her precision, her refusal, and she had won not because the world was fair, but because she had not accepted the alternative. She had built something real in a place where she had once been abandoned, and the light was coming through the windows exactly as she had planned. That was not luck. That was not rescue. That was Sophia Bennett, architect survivor, the woman who had sat in the cold and kept her eyes open, building the world she intended to live in one precise and deliberate window at a time.